Good morning, my name is Paula Phinn and today I'm going to share with you some tips on how to support literacy across the primary school. So the aims of this session are to share some websites which will be supportive to you at this time, also to offer tips around supporting things like reading comprehension and modelling reading with your child at home. And I'm also going to show you how we mark and assess writing, which might be helpful when you're trying to advise your child at home as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is share some websites. Obviously the school library is not available to the children at the moment, and you might not have a range of books at home for your child to sort of dip in and out of. So a lot of these websites have ebooks online which can be accessed at any time. So one of the websites here is called Get Epic, and I'll show you that in just a moment. We've also got Oxford Owls. Audible are offering free audiobooks at the moment to children and adults, which you might find quite helpful yourself. Sharjah Library are also offering free checkout of ebooks. I think you can check out about 5 at the one time. And Read Theory is a really great reading comprehension website. And we also have Pobble 365, which is great for supporting writing at home. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'll just share with you my internet screen just so that I can talk you through some of these websites. So the first one is Read Theory. If you just type in Read Theory, you will come to this site. And if you go in, it'll let you know that it's free. You can log in if you already have a login. Otherwise, you can click down here for parents, or you can click down here for students. Even if you log in as a parent, what will happen next is it will prompt your child independently to take a baseline assessment. So basically, there will be some questions that come up. So for example, we've got a little piece of written text here. This is aimed at grade 2. Which is not the equivalent of year 2, that would be our year 3 children. Usually it will start on grade 3, which is the equivalent of year 4, and it would ask you to read the text, not you, sorry, your child, ask your child to read the text and then answer the questions on the right hand side. Some of the questions might be sort of explicit information that has come directly from the text, and other questions might be around maybe a word that the author has used and trying to get your child's understanding of what the meaning of that word is within this piece of text. Or it might be a question which draws on inference, which is maybe not explicitly said in the text here. So a bit of a range. If your child is getting questions correct, it might even up the level of the challenge here. And likewise, if your child is not answering the questions correct, it might be that it drops it by a grade here, and then it'll try and find where your child's reading comprehension level is best suited according to the website. So then it will allow your child to work through questions like this. You can do this with your child at home to sort of support reading comprehension. The next website that I'd like to show you is Get Epic. So if you type that into your search engine, you will be taken to this page. Now, I've already created my own account here, so it will prompt you to create your own account, you know, as a parent or as a student or as a teacher. And there are lots of books to explore on here. You might already know that we do Accelerated Reader in our school. Accelerated Reader is a sort of system where we get children to read books according to their zone of proximal development. And the way that we determine that zone of proximal development is through their STAR reading assessments. So following the assessments, the teacher will be given a reading score for each child, an accelerated reading score, which, if you're unsure of what that is, your child might know what it is themselves because they're used to using that score in the school library, or it might be that you ask your class teacher. So if you go into the AR exploration part, you can then go in, so say your child had a reading AR score of 4.2, you would just go into this section. And as you see, lots of ebooks are available there for that reading score. It's actually broken down. So we've got 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, and there are non-fiction books as well as fiction books in there for your child to read. Some of them have a read to me option, so they can hear it as an audio book. Others, they can go in and have a look and read the books themselves. The other good feature about this, as you might have just seen, is that if there's a word in here that you don't understand, so say it was the word shyly, you can hover over it and it will bring up a definition of that word. So another great website for you to use. You might have noticed there as well that there were comics and things in there. So there's poetry, there's lots of reading materials for the children to use. You can also explore by grade. So first grade would be our year 2. So you can go in and have a look by grade if you wish to do it that way. Oxford Owls is another fantastic website. So again, if you just put into your search engine, Oxford Owls, you'll be taken to a page which looks like this. So if you go into books, and if you go into ebook library, and all of these are free. I think actually, sorry, I've missed a step. When you click on this, it will give you an option to use Oxford Owl from home first. So you just have to click on this, and then that'll take you to the page that I showed you a moment ago, where you can look at the ebook library, and you can browse the library by age, by series. This is probably the most useful for you. So if you had a child aged 7 to 9, you can go in and have a look at all of the ebooks that are available here. When you click on a book, it will prompt you to log in, and then you can just go in and create a free account there, and then you can access all of these books online, which is really useful. We've also got Pobble 365, but I'm going to show you that in just a moment when it comes to the writing part of the presentation. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and we'll go back into the PowerPoint presentation. Just bear with me. Okay, so we've been through all of those sites there which you can access books on if you don't have books at home. So some different ways for you to support reading at home. It's really important regardless of your child's age. So even if they're in year 6, that you're doing a lot of these things at home. I think we have a tendency to think that the older a child gets, that there's less of a need to be sharing books and doing these things together, but it is really important across the whole of the primary stage, right up to and including year 6. So the first thing that I would recommend is that you read yourself and that your child witnesses you reading yourself. It might be that you're reading a book for pleasure. So again, your child is seeing that you do reading for pleasure. It's not just something that's aimed at children, it's something that continues into adult life. It might be that you have a cookery book out in the kitchen and you're reading the instructions. You might ask your child to get involved in that, or it might be that you're working or doing something even on the computer, but it's important that they see you reading for real life purposes, and it's important that they see you reading for pleasure as well, even if that's non-fiction. It's also important that you read together. So even if your child is in year 6 or year 1 or wherever they are in the school, there should be a time that you get to spend reading together. This actually really helps to build relationships between parents and children, and helps to develop that confidence around reading as well. Don't be alarmed if when you first try this, there's a bit of resistance. I would recommend that you sort of build it in as a nice activity. So it might even be, you know, you reading to them at bedtime or something, as to sort of build that into the routine, and then slowly they might sort of gain trust around taking turns and reading together. So something that's very important, again, right for children, right up until primary 6, is that you're listening to your child reading aloud. I'm going to talk about modelling reading and the importance of that in a moment, and you won't know how your child is reading or what level they're reading at or how well they're reading unless you hear them reading aloud. And that goes for us as teachers as well. We must hear the children read regularly. Please choose books that are based on your child's interests. So if they have chosen a book, even if it's a book from the school library, or if they've chosen a book, one of these ebooks, and they decide maybe halfway through it that actually that's not a book that's going to hold their interest, it's perfectly okay for them to stop reading that book. As an adult, sometimes I even buy books off of the internet, or where I think, yep, I'm really going to enjoy this topic or this book, but actually I might get a third of the way through the book and think, I don't want to invest my time in this book. And that's okay, that's part of being a real reader, but it's okay for your child to do that as well. Don't force them to continue with a book that they're really, really not enjoying. It's very good for children to reread their favourite books, and their favourite authors. Particularly further down the school, if you've got picture books, it's great for children to reread, because they might have read that with an adult and then they go back and having another practice at it. They're building up their confidence, they're building up their reading fluency over time. And the same goes for children in the higher end of the primary school. Again, it's building up that reading fluency. You might find that they get more out of it in terms of reading comprehension if they reread a book, even 2 or 3 times. I would say, obviously, we want children to be reading lots of different books, so we wouldn't just want them to be reading the same favourite book over and over and over and over again, but it is something that we do encourage from time to time. Try to set a reading routine with your child. It's great for parents if you want to do that at bedtime. That is a lovely thing to do with your child, to read to them and with them at bedtime. But if you're doing shared reading, where your child is reading to you for some time, don't always do it at bedtime, because naturally bedtime is a time when children are very tired, so you're probably not going to hear their best reading at that time, but it is a nice activity in that time in the day as well. Please talk about the pictures, talk about the setting and the story, talk about all of these things with your child as you are reading and sharing books together. And when I'm talking about books, I'm not just talking about stories, this also includes non-fiction. So how can you support your child's reading comprehension at home? I've been onto the Book Trust website and I've pulled up some questions they have some really excellent leaflets on there and some little books that you can download on how to support your child with their reading. They have them in lots of different languages. I think they've got them in about 20 different languages or something. So I've just pulled this from the English language book. So here are some nice questions that you can think about and ask your child as you are reading. I would just be a little bit cautious about not turning that session into a question and answer session. Your child will soon get very bored of that and they won't want to engage. I know that sometimes when it's your own child as well, they don't maybe respond in the same way that they would to a teacher. They might get a bit defensive. They don't want you to be asking them something where there's a possibility that they get something wrong. So see if you can drop in some of these questions sort of casually as you are sharing the book with your child, and I'll tell you how you can do that. One way is to wonder aloud, and we often use this in school with the children. So as you're reading a book, even if you're reading something to your child, or if they're reading, the questions that sort of come into your head naturally as a reader, let them come out verbally in front of your child. So if you're wondering something about a character, or if maybe you weren't quite sure about if this character was this other character's brother and you can't remember, wonder that out loud. So say to your child, oh, I wonder if that's his friend or his brother, or let's go back and have a look, but model all of that out loud for your child. It's also good when you come across tricky words, and I'm not talking about words that you can't read necessarily, that your child can't sound out or read. I'm talking maybe about words that they can read but they possibly don't understand yet. So even if it was just a nice sort of piece of vocabulary, a nice word in there, it might even be the word empathy or something. Maybe your child has never heard that word before, so you might want to note it down and have a look at what that word means. If it's going to help your child's understanding of the text there and then, you might want to look it up straight away on the internet or using a dictionary. I know that some Kindles you can press on the word, and a bit like the website that I showed you, it will come up with a definition of the word straight away. Or you can just note it down and have a look at it after you've finished the reading. I wouldn't note down lots and lots of words for every piece of reading, but it is good to do this occasionally just to build up that vocabulary. But just watch that going and finding out the meaning of a word doesn't get in the way of the story or what you're enjoying doing at that time. Model how to skim or scan the text really quickly to find key information. So just like I was saying before, if quite often when I'm reading a story, if there's lots and lots of characters, sometimes you get a bit muddled about which character they're talking about. So you might go back and quickly scan the text, so you're reading it very, very quickly, not taking in everything to find a key piece of information. And it's important that we model that to children as well, and that's a good reading skill to have. Obviously in school we have a lot of activities that are to do with recapping a story or summarising what they have read. And you can do this orally after you've shared a book or a story or a chapter of a story. You can just talk about what it was that you were reading and what the main points were. And again, you don't have to question your child. You can just casually talk about it as part of your conversation. Also encourage your child to ask questions. I know that when I first started out as a teacher many years ago, I found it quite difficult to teach children to ask questions about stories and about non-fiction texts. But a good way to do it is to encourage them to take the role of the teacher, to ask them to come up with some questions that you have to answer. They can try and test you, and that's quite a good way of getting them to come up with their own questions. We also want to teach them about inference. So inference is where it might not explicitly say something in the text, but it's something which can be inferred or something that can be deduced from the text. So it might be that the author has used certain language or has made a character speak in a certain way to make you think something which hasn't actually explicitly been written down in the story or the text. And that's also an important skill to have, sort of reading beyond the lines and thinking about what the book's sort of key messages are. Also, the skill of prediction is something that we would try to develop in school. So you might stop at a key point in the story or maybe an exciting part of the story and say, I wonder what they're going to do next, or what do you think will happen, or where will they go with this? And it's not about your child getting that right or wrong. Sometimes in school I'll try and model this, and even if it's a book that I know and I've read the ending, sometimes I'll model that I've got it wrong. But it's more about using what you already know, what has happened in the book already, to make you think that it's going to end in a certain way, and putting those things together. Another really easy thing to do to support your child's reading comprehension and understanding of the book is to draw pictures about it. So you might want to draw pictures of a setting in the book. So if they've described a forest or something, you can go back and you can skim and scan the text to find out key descriptions about that setting to help you to draw it and maybe label the drawing as well. And likewise with characters, or if you're reading a book about I don't know, about animals or something, and you might want to draw a picture of one of the animals and maybe use the description and the facts that are in the book about that animal to help you to draw it and label it. And that's a really good way of drawing out information from the text, and your child's shown that they've not only read it, but they've understood that text. So as an adult, when you share reading materials with your child, it's really important that you model good reading behaviours. So the first thing that you'll want to model is punctuation, and how your voice changes depending on the punctuation that's in the book. So for example, if you see a question mark, you're modelling the way that your voice would go up at the end for a question. If you're reading an exclamation mark, you would also model how you would read that text accordingly, whether it was showing surprise or whether it was showing that someone was shouting, that you're modelling all of that with your child. We also want you to be thinking about prosody, which might not be a word that you've heard before, but prosody, I'm just going to move this out of the way. Prosody is when we use pause, pitch, stress, volume, and or tempo to sort of convey information about what we're saying. So I'm going to just model something to you now to help you understand what I'm talking about with that. So I've got one of my favourite books here. This is, anyone that knows me, or if I've taught your child, you'll probably know that I'm a bit obsessed with Harry Potter. So we've got Harry Potter, the first ever book here, and I'm just going to read you a few lines from the first chapter. So if your child was reading this book, they might sort of pick it up and read it to you like this. The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. So your child might read it quite basic like that. If it's your turn to read, we want you to use prosody. We want you to really model your use of voice to help the reader to understand what is going on in the story. So if I was reading this and modeling it to a child, I would read it like this. The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large moustache. So you'll see the difference when you're reading and you're sort of exaggerating the use of pausing and, you know, your volume and tempo and everything to really support the meaning behind the text. And you can model reading in lots of different ways. So the next point here is just reading sentences in different ways. So you might want to explore with your child using different voices, or reading it as though it's a question, or just lots of different play with that language to build confidence with your child. I've also just popped in here modelling direct and indirect speech. So direct speech is when we can actually see, so you'll see here the part that's in speech marks, that this person in the book has uttered, I am a little bit nervous. And then indirect speech is when someone is referencing something that has been said, but you don't actually know the exact words that came out of that person's mouth, and you won't expect to see speech marks or a speech bubble there. So indirect speech for this would be, she says that she's a little bit nervous. So you might kind of play about with how you would read those types of sentences as well, and where it would be appropriate maybe to put on a voice for that character, or where it would not be appropriate because it was indirect speech. So again, you can model sort of reading these as though they've got question marks or exclamation marks, or stressing certain words. So you might say something like, I am a little bit nervous, and just sort of experimenting with different ways of reading and how that changes the meaning of the text. And then again, just thinking aloud, any questions that come to you as you're sharing text with your child, please just comment, say them out loud. It's teaching your child to question and to think about the story more deeply. If you do come across any words that your child just can't read, not because they don't understand the word's meaning, but if they actually can't decode the word, there are lots of things that you can try. So you can try saying the sounds in the word, even if they can't say all of the sounds, or even if it's an irregularly spelt word, a sort of common exception word, they might want to try saying the first few sounds of it. Think about what word would make sense in that sentence. Also looking for letters or word chunks that they know within a word. So it might be that they find the word butterfly really difficult to read, but if they look at the end, they might be able to read the word fly, and then they might be able to sound out a little bit at the beginning, and those two things together would enable them to decode and read that word. They can also use picture clues. So if it's a storybook or non-fiction, they might want to look at the pictures, if that can help them with the word. And this also says sort of getting a running start, just reading the sentence again, quickly rereading it just to see if you can pop in the word that would make sense there. And if you can't figure out what it is, again, they might want to ask an adult or speak to you about it, which is also fine. But if they're reading on their own, they might just want to skip that word, keep reading, and then maybe go back and have a look at it later when they know more about that chapter or that book or that paragraph. So finding the right level of challenge for your child. We have some ways of doing this in school. So we do assessments. We try to make sure that children are reading books which are pitched at this level. So this sort of appropriate instructional text. These are the kind of books that we would be encouraging children to choose through the accelerated reader scheme, to make sure that it was at the appropriate level for them, where it's not too easy, but it's not too difficult as well. There's a way of working out exactly what sort of percentage your child is reading a certain text. That if you're very interested in that, you're more than welcome to go and have a look on this website. This is about how you take a running record for a child. So I've done this with children on many occasions. So what you would do is you would have a copy of a piece of text and you would get the child to read it, and I would have an exact same copy of that piece of text on a piece of paper, and as they read the words, I would be ticking off every word that they read correctly. If they said a word wrong, but without me interfering, they self-corrected it, I would still tick it. If they said a different word to the word that was on the page, I wouldn't mark it as correct. If they weren't able to read a word, I wouldn't mark it as correct. And then from that, you can work out what percentage of that text the child was able to read confidently. So if a child is able to read 96 to 100% of a text correctly, and I'm sure you have books at home where your child will be able to do this, that is an easy read for your child. You might automatically as a parent think, right, I don't want any of those, don't want my child to read easy read. This is actually really useful. Children having an easy read builds confidence, it builds fluency, and it's just good for developing their sort of overall comprehension as well, because they're not having to think about decoding or any of that while they are reading the text. They're just purely understanding it and just worrying about comprehension. For easy text as well, that's really good for children experimenting with different ways of reading, of using their voice to read, etc. So there's definitely a lot of value in children reading easy text. As I said, this appropriate instructional text, these are the kind of texts that we would encourage them to choose through their accelerated reader scheme in the library. So your child will have an accelerated reader score if they are in year 2 upwards. Sorry, I should have said that earlier on. Yeah, so this level is really good. That's where you're going to see a lot of reading progress, because it's not so difficult that it's putting them off reading, but it's just challenging enough that they're going to sort of progress in their reading. But again, I would still value easy text as well. Challenging text. Now, if you are only allowing your child to read really challenging text, so if you think about this, below 90%, so that's like every 10 words that they read on the page, that they're probably getting one of those wrong. That's a hard read for your child. And you might find that if you were to give your child a newspaper or something, that's the kind of level of that text, or a book that even, you know, if we're looking at Harry Potter books and things, if you were to give that to a year 1 child, or maybe at the beginning of year 2, that might be a really hard read for a child at that age. But I'm not saying that children can't access those texts. If it's a hard text that your child is showing an interest in, these are the books that I would definitely be doing a lot of sharing with an adult. So it might even be that you read most of that book to them, or all of that book to them, so that they are engaging with it. They're still getting to hear all of that wonderful modelling from the parent. But if they were only reading books like this, it would just teach them that reading's too hard and that it's not an enjoyable thing to do. So just make sure that you've got a nice balance there. Even with this appropriate instructional text, it's nice for you to do shared reading with that level of text as well. So writing, we'll have a quick move on to writing. So some basics, which might seem very obvious, but don't always happen. First thing about writing at home is just make sure that the children have got a quiet working space. Some children might find it easier to work with some quiet music on in the background, or but I know that me as a child, as an adult, I've never been able to do that, but you'll know what's right for your child. I certainly wouldn't have them in a room where the television or something was on to distract them. Also make sure that their seating position, again, I know this might be hard because you might not have the furniture to facilitate this in your house at the moment, but if you can, if you've got any small tables where when the child sits down at the table, their legs are bent and their feet are touching the floor and their feet are flat on the floor, that's the best writing position for your child. If their feet are dangling off the chair, it can make it quite difficult. If the table's too high, it can make it quite difficult as well. There's actually a lot of core muscles that are used for children sitting up properly at a table to write. So it becomes quite demanding if they're not sitting in the right comfortable position. Also make sure that they've got the paper slanted. So if they are right-handed, like the picture below, you will slant it slightly to the left. If they are left-handed, you would slant it slightly to the right. And make sure that they're holding the piece of paper or the book that they're writing on. Make sure they're holding it with their other hand. Some children do not do this, and it makes it really difficult. Even as an adult, if you have a go at writing something where you're not holding the piece of paper still, it's incredibly hard. So please make sure that they're holding the paper and that it's slanted. Also, just make sure that they've got the correct pencil grip, so they've got that they're using 3 fingers to grip the pencil there, and that they've got a sharp pencil for writing. Some children in Key Stage 2 might have been awarded with a licence to quill, which means they are allowed to write in pen because they've shown that their handwriting is quite skilled. And also handwriting is very important. I'm just going to show you some examples of handwriting. So if you have been at our school for a very long time, our handwriting programme has actually changed over the last few years. So it used to be that we would have sort of leading joins going into letters, which makes the writing look quite swirly and curly. There's no requirement in the national curriculum for England that children are doing those leading joins going. So let me just see if I can pull up my pen quickly to show you an example. Sorry, my handwriting's going to be very messy here because I'm doing it on the screen. But say I was writing the word letter, and if I was doing it with a pre-join, I would write it like this. So you see this sort of pre-join that goes into the letter L there. We are no longer doing that in the school. Some children might have developed that style of handwriting already. We're not going to say that they cannot write like that anymore, not at all. But the writing that we're encouraging in our handwriting lessons is the writing that you can see on the page right now. So in year 1, we wouldn't teach joined writing unless that individual child was showing that they could form every single letter perfectly and forming them the correct size. So you'll see that any tall letters, and it's not necessarily uppercase and lowercase because this is a lowercase t, but this is a tall letter. So tall letters will touch or almost touch the line above, and your smaller letters will be half of the space between the lines there. And you'll see that all of my small letters here are all the same height, and that's what it should look like. Even sort of the round part of the K there is in line with the rest of these small letters, and the round part of the B is in line with the rest of the small letters. We teach the children, again, you don't need to be too fussy about this. This is something we'll support in school and through their handwriting lessons. There are some letters which we don't join from, but you'll see that letter B, for example, we do join to the letter B. I've not got an example of it there, sorry. Let's look at the letter G. We do join to the letter G, but we're not going to join from it. It's important to note that children in year 6 are allowed to, and it's encouraged in the curriculum, are allowed to develop their own handwriting style. So you might see that they start to add some new flicks and things and develop their own style, but it's got to be legible and neat and be able to be read by other people. As the children move further up the school, you'll see that the handwriting that's taught starts to become a little more slanted to one side. We don't join from capital letters, and the reason that I've written this sentence, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, is because this sentence includes every single letter in the English alphabet. So just to give you a look there at what the handwriting expectations are, and it is really important that children are showing the correct handwriting. So planning for writing. If I asked you right now to write me a story about a dragon and didn't really give you much more information, you would, as an adult, you would find that really difficult. So what we do with the children is we get them to plan out stories. We'll give them lots of visuals, we'll discuss it with the class, we'll take everybody's excellent ideas, we'll allow them to share lots of ideas. It's not just about them, coming up with creative stories and things. It's we share all of those ideas and then they get to sort of plan them out. So this is a simple planner. This hasn't been drawn by a child, obviously, but we would get children to do this in school. So you might see things like this in year 1, year 2, even further up the school, where we get children to draw just little diagrams of different things that happened in the story. So the story of Goldilocks, the three bears went out on their walk. Goldilocks came, she ate their porridge, knocked over the chairs, broke the little chair, slept in the bed, they came back, he was sad. It's just little pictures to remind them what happened. So if the child's writing this story, they know to write a sentence about this, maybe a few sentences here, maybe some sentences about what happened with the porridge. It just gives them a reminder about what they're writing about next. And even in year 1 and year 2, we might get the children to annotate this, so just write some useful words or phrases beside each of the pictures to help them. Next, I'm going to show you a story mountain, and we'll have a look at some of the other planners. So a story mountain is quite similar, where we would get children to draw pictures here. So just the opening of the story, and then to when there becomes a problem or a dilemma in the story, and then what's going to happen to resolve that as you come to the end of the story. Again, getting children to draw little pictures, putting in little phrases and things to help them build up their story. Again, we've got other sort of models of planners here. So this might be for a story again, beginning, middle and end, just quite simplistic. This one is a bit like the Story Mountain, where you've got a kind of plot for the story. This would be used further up the school. What was the complication in the story? How did they resolve it? And again, they're writing in like keywords and things here. We would also maybe give them mats, which had like a word bank or something on it to encourage them to use different vocabulary that we might be focusing on. And then here's one for a recount, where they're retelling something that actually happened. So we want them to include who, what, when, where, and we want them to say the order of events. We might also do something like this when we're getting children to start thinking about paragraphs further up the school. So it might be that the first paragraph is going to be all about describing the setting. The next paragraph is introducing the first character, or whatever it may be. So we would use these things in school to encourage children to plan out what they're going to write, instead of just being faced with a blank piece of paper and having to write lots. So as I said to you, Pobble 365 is a really excellent website for supporting writing. I'm just going to show you that now. So if I go to my internet page again, and if we have a look at Pobble 365, so if you again just put that into your search engine, and this page will come up. So there'll be a different picture on here every day. So this is today's picture. So we can see a little girl who seems to be sailing in the sea, but in a bath. There's a turtle down here. And if we scroll down, you'll see a sort of bigger image here, and it'll give you a story starter. She knew that it hadn't been a good idea to leave the tap running, but now she was starting to enjoy herself. So this is all the kind of things, mysterious things that could happen to a little girl who seems to have run an ocean. Here they're encouraging the children to be writing and thinking of verbs that would go with each of these nouns. So it might be that the turtle danced through the water, and then you would want them to be using these kind of phrases in their own writing. We've also got lots of questions here to help children to come up with their own ideas. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Children can get as creative as they like. Just as I said earlier about drawing, about drawing pictures, that can help again with comprehension and understanding all of this, but also for coming up with ideas for their own writing. And then we've got sentences down at the bottom. Sometimes the sentences might have a grammatical mistake or spelling mistake. Sometimes they might not. They just want you to make them more interesting. If your child's not enthused by this picture, Pobble 365 posts a different picture for all the 365 days of the year. So you can go back through and find a picture which might engage your child more. So again, I'll just stop sharing. I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint and just get a couple more things just to share with you. Okay, so I've got a piece of writing here, and this piece of writing is sort of, it may be end of year 1, sort of start of year 2, typical piece of writing. So I'm just going to let you have a read at that and think about, what has this child done well, and what does this child need to work on next? So what would you mark that they've done well, and what have they maybe not done so well? Have a little read. Now, because there's some very creative spelling in here, I'm just going to read this out to you. Once upon a time, I was in my submarine and I saw a mermaid. Then I went to exploring the sea. Then I went back to land to see my grandma. So first of all, I'd be saying to this child, well done, you've used a sort of familiar phrase at the beginning of your story to let me know that this is probably going to be a fairy tale. So once upon a time is language that is associated with fairy tales. She's used some really big words, so words like exploring and mermaid and things, and the child's had a really good go at spelling these, so they are really using their phonics to help them to spell these words, so I would definitely be praising them on that as well. But you'll also see that obviously there is a lot of work to be done with spelling here. Again, if this was year 1 or beginning of year 2, I wouldn't be overly worried about this, but I would be looking out for which spelling words are going to be used most often by this child. So here, I, saw, these are very common words. You can see that actually this child has written I correctly another few times, so that's going to be a very easy fix. This actually is phonetic, so again you would praise the child, yep, that does say I in phonics, but when we write I, we write it this way. So we would address that straight away, and we would probably address the word saw straight away before we would address words like once and mermaid and exploring. I probably wouldn't mention them at this point until I've got the common words right. And basically what I'm just trying to show you here is if your child does a piece of writing that looked like this, give them lots of praise. You want to get them to see writing as something that they are successful in, that they're confident with. So lots and lots of praise, and then just a few things, 1, maximum 2 things to sort of work on there. You wouldn't want to pull this apart and tell them all of the words that were spelt wrong and get them to rewrite it. That would be very inappropriate, and it would probably put the child off writing. So just be careful about any feedback that you might want to offer. Just think about your child's working memory. Again, I might have mentioned this earlier, that when your child is reading or writing, they're trying to do lots of things at the one time. So they might be trying to decode words. They're trying to remember to use expression when they're reading. They're trying to understand what the words actually say when they're all put together. When they're writing, they're trying to remember to use their full stops and their capital letters and to use speech marks and to remember how to spell that tricky word. It's a lot. It's a lot for your child to do all at the one time. So this is why we have to be very, very careful about the feedback that we're giving children and helping them to build up those skills and be automatic with, you know, spelling common words and reading common words, and so that it allows them then to focus on other things like comprehension. So I've just got some other examples here. So from further up the school, I'll not go into these in too much detail because I think I've run way over my time here. So words like hobby here, you probably wouldn't focus on so much, but words like there, this is not spelt correctly. So they've used the wrong type of there. So that's something that I would want to address, because if this was maybe about a year 4 level, that's a word that child's going to have to use a lot. They're going to have to use all of their variation spellings quite a lot. So I would want to address that. Again, something that I didn't mention with the last piece, with every piece of writing that we do, there'll be a learning intention tied to that, a learning intention or learning outcome. Whatever that learning outcome was that was shared by the teacher, we would obviously comment on that as well. So if it was that they'd to use adjectives, or if it was that they to use exclamation marks, for example, here I would be wanting to praise the child that yes, they had made a real good use of using exclamation marks, but that might actually be something that I want to feedback as a next step as well, because in this one piece of writing, over these however many lines there's quite a lot of exclamation marks, so we probably wouldn't expect to see that many in the one piece, and I would sensitively support the child in what other punctuation could we use to show that you can show a range of punctuation. Just another piece here, again, we just wouldn't pull apart every mistake in there. Lots and lots of praise, keeping the confidence high and picking out the one thing, the 1 or 2 things that are really going to push their writing on, and that are going to be used in the widest range of contexts. Last thing to share with you today, we are going to be doing a primary assessed write over the next month. At some point, it might come, within the next 3 or 4 weeks. We do this every term, so we didn't want it to be different this term during remote learning. Usually what we do is our fabulous head of English in primary, Heather Ford, she will share a picture or a video which is a stimulus for the children to watch. So it's something that will spark their interest, and then we will want the children to write, to do a piece of writing on it. So it might be a story, it might be a recount. I think it's going to be a story this time. And then what we would do is we would have an input session with the teacher, where probably through a live session, the children will talk about their ideas, they'll share ideas, and then they'll probably have a planning lesson where the teacher will provide some kind of planning template for them, and they'll sort of plan and think about the words and the sentences and the ideas that they want to put into that story. And then what we'll do is the children will have an opportunity to write the story independently at home. We would encourage that is an independent task, as it is an assessment. We'll give you advice about that nearer the time, but do try very hard that is an independent task, so that we can assess where they are with their writing. We also have other samples that we've used in school that were independent, which we can sort of compare it to and give your child their overall sort of assessment for the year. Just to support this, I'm just going to see if I can get it up quickly. I'm going to share one last thing which will go along with that. For every year group, let me just check if I'm sharing this. For every year group, we have a writing checklist, and this is what our teachers use when they moderate writing across the year group. So they have meetings after every writing assessment, and they look at individual pieces of work, and they decide whether the child is working towards the expected standard for that year group. So are they doing these types of things, or are they working at the expected standard for the year group? Are they doing these things? Or are they working at greater depth? Are they doing all of these things? And you'll see that we've color coded this. We've got pink for writing composition, we've got green for grammar, punctuation and spelling, and we've got blue for transcription. So there are lots of things in there. You'll see that between some of the sort of different stages, working towards, working at the expected, working at greater depth, there might not be a lot of difference. It might be sort of how much they're doing something independently, or are they doing it in lots of different contexts. So for example, even here, we've got I can spell some year 1 common exception words accurately. I can spell some year 1 common exception words, and in greater depth, they can spell all the common exception words and the days of the week correctly. So there might not be a lot of difference between those, but it's really getting a best fit for which one of these overall is describing where that child is with their writing. Okay, so we will share this with you when we do the writing assessments. We'll get them on the Padlets as well, so that you know what to expect for your child for that year group. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope that was really helpful for you. If you've got any other questions, please feel free to get in touch either with your class teacher or with our head of primary English, Heather Ford, or with myself. I know that Heather Ford has created an excellent video which has got lots of spelling tips for you, and that was not a live session because Heather had all her appointments with her parents today. So she's put that out as a pre-recorded video, which you are welcome to go and have a look at. Thank you very much. Stay safe, and we hope to see you all very soon. Thank you.